Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking Faith, the weekly devotional where Callum and I share a little bit from our hearts, what we've been studying through in our own personal walk with God and what God has shown us to reflect on over the last week. We're going to be looking at Psalm chapter 36 today. Callum's going to read it for us in a couple of moments, but just before he does, I urge you to get yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, sit down and relax as you watch us as we continue talking faith together. The thing that stands out to me about this passage, just before Callum reads it, is the fact that in the face of the other nations turning away from God and not looking to the light that the nation of Israel should be, so quickly David goes to the fact of God's love. That's where he turns to instantly. And that's, I think, where he calls us to turn to whenever we're going through hard times, to turn to his love. But let's have Callum read for us now, Psalm chapter 36.
Your steadfast love, O Lord, extends to the heavens, your faithfulness to the clouds. Your righteousness is like the mountains of God, your judgment like the great deep. Man and beast you save, O Lord. How precious is your steadfast love, O God. The children of mankind take refuge in the shadow of your wings. They feast on the abundance of your house, and you give them drink for the rivers of your delights. For with you is the fountain of life. In your light do we see light. Oh, continue your steadfast love to those who know you, and your righteousness to those upright of heart. Let not the foot of arrogance come upon me, nor the hand of the wicked drive me away. There the evildoers lie fallen. They are thrust down, unable to rise.
This passage has got quite a lot of nice imagery in it. It essentially has not quite pictures, but he's alluding to pictures that reveal God's character, reveal God's love. And I think for me, that's the best form of poetry that we find in Scripture, because it, for lack of a better way of putting it, a picture paints 1,000 words. I remember when I was on a mission trip, maybe I was about 15, 16, and we were going around, we had our day off and we were going around Glasgow in the open top tour buses. And I was bored. I was young, I didn't really have care for the architecture around or really care much about the town itself, the site itself. So I just didn't care. And we're on this bus and I was so bored. I remember we went to Kelvin Grove Museum and I was going around just kind of following people. I didn't really have much desire to go and look at the art. But I remember seeing a picture, a painting of Jesus on the cross, looking over a body of water with some people in boats. And I remember just being stunned. It changed the day from being a boring day to that's the day I saw the picture that revealed the whole gospel to me. Jesus on the cross looking over people doing their day-to-day stuff. Jesus' love for us shone through that picture for me that day. And I think these pictures that David paints really does shine through that same love that God has for us. And I think particularly in verse 9, we see a couple of things that he calls us to. He says that God has the fountain of life. And then secondly, he also says that God has the light that reveals to us essentially the way to go. It reveals to us the light. So there's two things that stand out, two images. This concept of a fountain and this concept of the light. I think we see this quite often in Scripture. The concept of a fountain of water, we kind of get that all the way back in Genesis as we're thinking about the tree of life and we're thinking about the rivers that flowed through the garden. And then as we go to the very end of Scripture, we think of the river flowing and bringing life to everything around it. And then I think of Jesus, because Jesus says he is the water of life. He is a living water. And that's kind of a story that I've reflected on before during one of my devotions, that time where he's sitting by the well and he's saying, well, if you knew who I was, you'd ask for living water. This passage is reminding us that God has this water of life that he calls us to come to take from, to come to Jesus during the times where things are tough, to come to him and receive that water of life, that rejuvenating water that helps us to continue on our journey with him. And then secondly, to look for the light in our life. Again, that's an image that's been painted through Scripture. The nation of Israel was called to be a light, but unfortunately, I think David's mourning here because they're not really doing that. The nations aren't looking and seeing God. Instead, they're going about and doing their own thing. I think this passage is calling us to remember the light of God. For us, that being Jesus. When times get tough, to look back to the light of Jesus, what we see in the Gospels and what he calls us to do in our day-to-day life, and to step forward into that light, to use that to help us to guide ourselves as we move forward step by step. I think this passage challenges us to return to Jesus. When we're down, when we're feeling like things are tough, return to him and he will show us the way forward in our walk with him, to continue to show God's love to others around us. I think this passage can be summed up nicely by love, life, and also light. And hopefully that is a challenge to you as you continue thinking about these things. God bless.